Hello, everyone. This is Phil Golfi with REMAX, the Golfi team. Welcome to the Golfi Real Estate Show with host Stephanie Vivier.
Well, hello, Phil. It's so great to speak with you. Thanks for joining us on the show today. How have things been?
Things are good. Things are busy. I mean, this weather is a little lousy for somebody who enjoys the outdoors and everything that comes with the outdoors. It's golf and cycling and tennis, and that's all put on hold, and we'll just, wait for the lousy weather to pass. It's, I opened my pool last week and got all the chemicals ready and, spruced up the backyard and fertilized and oversee, and it did all that good stuff for it to rain all week. So I'm not going to be too negative about it, but we're hoping for a little nicer weather. I actually have I always say summer is the time of fence disputes amongst neighbors, right?
Isn't that the truth?
Oh man. And you talk to any fencing contractor and they're stuck in the middle, and it's who's paying for it and what type of fence are we getting and all that stuff. And God bless all the good neighbors out there who are able to come to terms and agree and figure out their new fences. It's so funny. It's like you got this neighborhood barbecue and you're all figuring it out, especially all those new subdivisions that were built. But I found myself in, my own little dispute, unfortunately. So I bought a property at the end of 2023, and my backyard is tree lined. Beautiful mature trees. Some of them, weren't properly taken care of or manicured, so they needed a little sprucing up. So as it goes, the property next door to me the house is torn down and there's a new house that's being built. Well, what happens is the builder comes by, chops down all the trees and removes the fence. And, I'll preface this by saying it was an old chain link fence. Like it wasn't, the prettiest thing or, the most appealing fence. And, you could say it needed to be replaced, but I didn't care because it was, it was tree lined. So it was all kind of blocked by trees and shrubs and bushes and things like that. So, fast forward to now, he comes to me with an invoice or a bill, to pay for half of the fence, the builder. And I said, well, wait a minute. I go, I was fine with the fence. I didn't need a new fence. If you look at the other side of my property, it's the exact same fence that was torn down. Why should I have to pay for half of this? So I found myself in a little bit of a fence dispute, unexpectedly, with no conversation prior, but just an invoice. So I wonder what everyone's or people's opinions are on that. I'm probably am going to pay for the fence or half the fence, just to not create a dispute or any friction between myself and my new neighbor. But I feel like I was a little bit, taken advantage of in a way. And I don't know how I feel about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is because it's one of those things where they did it without talking to you first. And I think people really want to be involved in the process. And even though, sure, you don't want to be paying for this fence, it wasn't your decision to, take it down and put it back up, whatever it is. It's just that if you would have been part of the conversation at the beginning, I think you kind of feel different about it. It's the idea that this other person made this decision and then all of a sudden it's your wallet that has to pay for it, that people find particularly egregious. We had that situation. We have a cottage and there was a tree, and there's many trees in this area that they're so beautiful. That's part of, the draw of being there. But they're at that age, right, where it's going to come down. And if it came down, it would come on our cottage, except that it's not actually on our property line. Right. So the guy whose property it was on came to us and another cottage that also, potentially, depending on which way the wind's blowing, okay, this could affect you too, and said, this is taking trees down is expensive. Can we share this? And so, did we want to chip in on that bill? No, but we also didn't want to get that call that we had a tree inside. Right. But I think it's that conversation that makes the difference.
Yeah, it's so difficult, and there's so like summertime is the time of those conversations and trying to maintain a half decent relationship with your neighbor, because it just makes it so much more comfortable in living where you are. And I've seen it. I've seen neighborhoods where, you know, people all get along and no one moves because, you know, they're best friends and they're kids and everyone's friendly, and then you see it and, you know, there's disruptions in the neighborhood, and it's not a good feeling for, you know, where people live and how they live. So, but yeah, like I said, I'm gonna, you know, I'll probably fork out the cash for this fence, but it definitely doesn't come with a little bit of disappointment, I'd say, but that's all right.
Yeah, it leaves you with a little bit of a sour taste. But at the same time, since you've paid for it, now you got to stay, right? Because you
I know.
the fence that you paid for.
I know. This is so recent too, and it's like just even talking out loud about it is just like, oh, like it's just. But that's the way it goes sometimes, right? That's the way it goes.
Yeah, I know. And how much, depending what kind of fence you're going to be doing, the price of lumber and all of those things really play all into it. This is, you know, though, I was having this conversation, Phil, with my cousin who's looking to get into the housing market, and they're not here in Niagara, but they put an offer on a house and they didn't get it. And I said, you know what, listen, owning a house is great, but you do have to be ready for those unexpected expenses, right? Like those kinds of things are going to come up. So, you know, consider that as well when you're looking at your budget.
Yeah. So I was one who kind of came from the traditional home ownership kind of steps, right? And when I first moved out, I went and bought, you know, a small little condo and lived there by myself, and it was great and it was fun. It was fantastic. And then I jumped up to a newer build townhome. And, you know, just a little bit more space. I was looking forward to having a garden and a small little backyard, and you know, it was just needed more space. And then from there, I jumped up to a detached home, and something that was, you know, was older and needed maintenance, and you know, had all those types of home ownership types of things. And when I was in my condo, my condo fee rapidly, you know, increased like really fast. And when I first moved in, it was like $220. And within probably, you know, 2 years, I want to say we jumped up to like $540. And at the time, I'm like, this is completely insane. I'm paying $540. You know, I don't even use the gym. I go to, you know, I have a different gym membership, and our condo had a pool, but, you know, I don't use a pool. You know, I don't even go in the pool. And then we had community barbecues, and then, you know, there was all these different things in terms of amenities that I was paying for, and I didn't use them. And now I am in my house, and I look back at myself complaining about my $540 condo fee. It has become so expensive to maintain and fix and update and do all your home ownership stuff that I would, you know, looking back now, I would be like, oh, I would pay $500, $600 a month. No problem. And it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, because now it's, you know, anytime some tech person comes to your house, it's like $150 or $200 just for them to show up at the door and tell you, you know, to replace something. So it's, you know, home ownership does, you know, it comes with its expenses, especially, you know, those beautiful wartime homes and those older homes that make our neighborhoods so pretty.
That's a great perspective. I find those particularly interesting when they show up and you think, oh, they're going to fix it. But they always tell you to get something new, don't they, Phil? Like, it's never like, oh, I'm going to go get the $20 part. They just say, well, you should buy a new one.
Hey, you know what? They don't make things like they used to, right? And like, I was having, you know, I remember growing up and my parents had, you know, they had an appliance repair tech that would pop in and out whenever something broke down. And, you know, I recently had a fridge that, you know, the compressor went on me, and it was this new fancy fridge and had your water and your ice, and the front of the fridge had this glass where you can kind of click a button and you can see inside. It was cool. It was a cool fridge. And the tech shows up and he said, yeah, he goes, it'll be cheaper for you to go buy a new one than it would be for me to replace this entire or fix this entire fridge. And I said, are you serious? He goes, and even like, he goes, in terms of trying to diagnose it, he goes, even if it, like, you can try to fix it. If it's not fixed, then all of a sudden you're out, you know, $1,500 or $1,000, and it still might not work. So it's, you know, it can get costly and expensive.
Wow, that's a lot because I mean, describing that fridge, that's not an old one. Like you hadn't had that for a long time. You can tell by the technology you were describing there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right, let's talk about real estate. How have things been this week?
Yeah, things are good. I mean, the long weekend was quiet for me. We noticed that appointments are down across a lot of listings, but inventory continues to rise. And I believe it will start picking up, especially once we get into the June and July months. And then we'll take kind of a little break in terms of, the market will cool down through the summer as everyone gets off and spends more time with their families and gets into their summer vacations. And then as September comes, it'll start to ramp up again. So we're, in terms of just looking at the appointment, our appointment center and tracking appointments, we have a stat right now that states about 9 to 10 appointments per sale is that's what's happening right now, which is moderately, high. But it's about average, which is good. But the market's strong. Things are moving. We see the price ranges of your 6 to 800,000 seem to be the most popular price ranges that people are looking for. And those are stats that we're able to track when people are visiting our website, and in terms of searching for listings. So that, what that tells me right now is that's the biggest buyer pool. That's all your first time home buyers. That is your, your downsizers as well. And that's people that are coming to Niagara, in terms of affordability, that's probably the largest population of homes available in Niagara is that price range. So, we're still seeing an influx of GTA buyers and buyers from Hamilton and Burlington, coming to Niagara and looking for affordability. But yeah, overall the market's strong. Unit sales are down, but the prices remain stagnant.
You say, what would you say about 9 visits per sale? That,
Yeah.
I know that's a little higher, but really it's not a lot, right?
That's right. And then when
it's a little work for the realtors, like maybe some realtors who got in 2020, 21, 21 haven't seen this, but it's just a little work, I guess.
Yeah, that's all. Like, when your house is up for sale, it feels like it's an eternity, right? And time goes by so fast and so quickly, that a month will just fly by. But when you look at our average days on market, on average, it's about 30 to 35 days right now to get your home sold. And so there's still a lot of people that are adjusting from that, that crazy fast market of the COVID market where, I'll hear all these stories. It's like, oh yeah, we sold in a weekend and we had 40 showings and it was amazing and it was great. And then there's still, some people out there that thinks that's normal, but our markets have completely shifted and we're more in a traditional, more of a balanced market where there's a lot of inventory and you need to get the buyer's attention to come see your property. And that's where the marketing matters. That's where being proactive as an agent is important. And that's why you're starting to see, in terms of the top teams, the top agents, the ones who are serious about their business, be successful in this market. And, you don't want to be the house where you're up for sale in a neighborhood and all those other houses around you are selling and you're looking around wondering why no one's coming to see your house. It's a difficult, feeling in being there, but we, like I said, we're still in a good market. As much as there's a lot of negative news out there about what's going on in our economy with the tariffs, and you can paint it in a picture of a way that it might not be the right time to buy a house, or it might not be the right time to make a move, but we're still in a really strong market, and prices are holding.
That's good. Setting expectations you just gave, Phil. You talked about that 30 days. Is that something you do with the clients when you're sitting down, like give them the update on where the market is and say, this is about how long you could anticipate? Like, I think kind of like we started talking about with the fence thing, people want to be included in the conversation.
Yeah. 100%. So, if I'm going to come down and sit with you and we're going to talk about, an upcoming sale on your house, you use all the data that's available to you, to kind of predict or forecast the sale. And that's not just for, price, but it's also for timeline. And because timelines are important, there's a lot of people who will come to me and say, hey, Phil, I want to make this move by the end of June, or I want to be out of my house by the end of July. So we'll map out a timeline, which also corresponds with price and aggressiveness in terms of price. And so how we're able to map this out is in terms of just looking at the overall neighborhood. Well, if there's 12 or 15 active listings and they've all been on the market for 60 plus days, it's going to show a longer timeline in terms of your sale. But if we're in a great neighborhood and, there's not a lot of active listings and, there's a really good opportunity to sell. Well, it's going to say, well, we're going to have a shorter timeline. So you're able to predict, like if you look at the overall market stats, yeah, you're going to get a median number and that's great. But you want to dive and dig a little deeper in terms of neighborhood specifics. And we're able to do that with the information that we have access to. And we're able to, like I said, map out a listing roadmap for each and every single one of our listings and try and, be a little bit more predictable. In the end, it's still very difficult. We live in a very unpredictable business, but it's, we try to, be a little bit more predictable and help the sellers kind of map out their listing timeline to advance their life in terms of where they're moving to next.
All right, you're listening to the Golfi Real Estate Show. Our guest, Phil Golfi, today. He's going to stick around. I hope you will too. This is News Talk 610 CKTB.
I know the importance of hiring the best agents.
I'll take a photo of your house and post it on the World Wide Web.
Next,
our multi-million-dollar marketing system reaches tens of thousands of potential home buyers every day.
Go to robgolfi.com and put the best team to work for you.
Welcome back to the Golfi Real Estate Show. I'm Stephanie Vivier. Phil Golfi is with us today from the #1 selling Golfi REMAX team. Getting into all things real estate today, as they are today, not yesterday. That's what the Golfi team is all about, updated information. All right, Phil, let's get into some of the sales. And we talked a little bit in the first half about how things have shifted in the real estate market over the past few years, and property value continues to be one of those things that people don't understand. So let's talk about property value and how sometimes people can be unrealistic about theirs.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about, a sale of property conditions. And this is something that we constantly see in our market right now, just given the market conditions, right? Buyers are able to go in there with protection. They're able to include, a condition on finance, condition on inspection, and even a condition on sale of property and still be competitive and get their offer accepted. In comparison, when you're in a high competitive environment with lots of buyers on a certain property, buyers will often have to waive those conditions and take on the risk, right? Take on risk of perhaps not, being able to get financing or not doing an inspection and doing all their due diligence on the particular property, or even, having to go out and buy a house without knowing if their property is going to sell. But in this market, buyers have those types of options to be able to do those things. So what we're seeing right now is we are seeing a lot of sale of property conditions, which is good. And it's good protection for the buyer, meaning that when the buyer puts in an offer, the offer will be conditional on the buyers selling their house. And if the buyer does not sell their house, they would not then proceed with the sale and they would get their deposit back and look down the road or do whatever. But they're not going to put themselves in a position where they're owning two homes or they have an upcoming closing and they need to rush to sell theirs and drop the price. And it's a very difficult position to be in. So like I said, you can submit a conditional offer based on the sale of that property. Now, one of the things that I see agents, make the mistake is they're not assessing the property value of the sale of property house, meaning the buyer's house. And so what will happen is we'll get an offer and we'll agree to all the terms and conditions, price, closing date, conditions, and everything looks great. But you have to go one step further and say, okay, let me validate and see what the product is and what the buyer is selling. And so oftentimes on the agreement, it'll have the buyer's address and say this offer is conditional on the sale of the buyer's property known as X, 123 Main Street East, which is fine. Now, I'll go back to that agent and say, hey, listen, I know you're listing the buyer's property. What price are you listing at? Are you guys ready to be listed right away? Do you have photos done? Do you have marketing done? Where are you guys at in the listing? And sometimes, not often, but sometimes the agent will come back to me and say, oh, we still haven't taken photos. The buyers are 2 weeks away from listing. And that's that. And I said, well, why don't you go get the property ready to be listed? And then in 2 weeks, you can resubmit your offer, because I don't want to accept a conditional offer and then wait 2 weeks for your buyer to get their property up and listed. On top of that, you want to know the price of the backup property, because we're in real estate. We know values. You can get an idea in terms of a value, based on an address and a house and a location. And if that value or their listing price is completely unrealistic, you are putting yourself behind, so far behind, and you're not going to get a successful sale. So now, you've in the event that you accept the offer, now you're waiting for a buyer who's going to be unrealistic about the sale of their property and their price to be able to produce a sale on yours. It's kind of a backwards thing, but like I said, one of the most important things you need to do when looking at a sale of property condition from a buyer on your property is make sure you evaluate that backup house, or also known as the buyer's house, to ensure that you're gonna lead to a successful sale. And there's a lot of times where we'll look at an offer and we'll say, well, your buyer's unrealistic about the value of the property. We're never going to get to a sale, but we love the purchase price, we love the condition, we love the closing date, everything works, but your buyer needs to be more realistic about the sale of their property. So that's something that, especially in this market that we're seeing right now, because we're seeing more conditional on sales in terms of the offers that we're getting, that it's so important to make sure you evaluate the backup house.
So what you just explained there, Phil, is like so much value that the Golfi team brings. Like, people just think, oh, what do I need a realtor for? They're just, signing papers. I can do this on my own. But really what you've explained is like, not only are you guiding your clients through, okay, this house is, they've got it listed here. It's probably only worth this because of the market, but you're also then, looking at, or they're buying the house that your sellers are selling. You're also looking at another house and analyzing the value. Like, there's a lot of deep work that you're doing in order to properly help people navigate this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Like real estate, I always say it's like a domino. It's a domino chain that's falling. There's a lot of sales that lead up to another sale, right? There's a lot of moving parts, and you try to be, as agents, you try to be in control as much as you can to make sure that you can facilitate those moving parts. But when you're not in control of it, you need as much information as you can get about that, and just be realistic about it, because there's nothing worse than setting your client up in a position where everyone's sitting around and waiting for someone else to sell their property, and 3 or 4 months go by, and you're back to square one in terms of where you were in the first place with an unsuccessful sale and a property on the market. So it's sometimes it's difficult to navigate, but we've seen so many people make mistakes in terms of accepting an offer conditional on a sale of property with a subject property that has no chance of selling. So it's just a not a good position to be in as a seller or as a seller agent.
Do you recommend for your clients to do the sale of property condition when they're looking to buy and sell at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially in this market, you never want to put anyone in a position where they could potentially own 2 homes or are forced to a fast sale. And unfortunately, we've seen situations especially when markets change, that people will go in and say, oh yeah, my property is going to sell, and we're pretty confident, we live in a nice house, and then all of a sudden markets transition on you, and now you're sitting there on the market, and you have an up and coming closing, and you're put in this really difficult position where you need to sell super quickly or super fast to get on to the next one. So like I always say to people, this market is a good market to move in, because you're able to put in those risk adverse conditions and protect yourself against your move. Whereas in previous markets, when things were going fast and quickly, if you really wanted a property, you would then have to remove that sale of property condition. And then all of a sudden you're you're taking on this risk and this anxiety and this pressure to make sure you get sold by a certain date. And if that doesn't happen, the financial burden of your risk potential of your breach of contract, you could lose your deposit. You're responsible for, all the things that come with not closing on a property are the financial burden is massive. So, and in our industry, we've seen people make mistakes of buying properties without sale of property conditions and just thinking that their property is going to sell by a certain time and a certain date. And that's when I get back to the predictability. Is we try to be so predictable using all the data that we have access to, but sometimes it just doesn't work out in that. So like I said, in this market, we are seeing a ton of sale of property conditions. And if you're thinking of moving, and you have a property to sell, I would always recommend to put a sale of property condition in, just to protect yourself from, like I said, that kind of nightmare of not being able to sell your property and you have a closing up and coming. It's a really difficult position to be in, as an agent and in terms of advising buyers and sellers, and also as a client who put themselves in that position.
Great advice for sure. This is the Golfi Real Estate Show. Phil Golfi is with us today. Some changes in the market have been that people who bought just a few years ago are now looking to sell, and they're actually getting less than what they paid. This is a real change, Phil.
Yeah, it's a big change, and it's I would say it's the first time I've seen this in my career. I've been doing it for just under 10 years now, and when you start to evaluate properties and you start to look back at the 2021, 2022 markets and see the sales history and the sales data of particular properties, there's a lot of people who bought in those markets that if they were to sell or did sell, they're selling at a sale loss in comparison to what they bought for. So there's some stats that are available. The median loss, and this is from TerraNet, which is Ontario's land registry agency. They found that across Ontario, 25% of properties bought in 2022 and sold in 2024 suffered a loss in value. The median loss was $45,000, while in the Toronto region, it was a little higher, coming in at $56,000. According to TerraNet, only 2 to 4% of properties in Ontario sell at losses to their original purchase price. And then the surge of losses began in 2022, when 9.5% of properties bought and sold that year lost money. So we're seeing right now, in terms of just the life cycle of home ownership, is people are moving every, on average 3 to 5 years. So a lot of those properties are coming up and people are, whether moving on or doing something different, and they are selling at a lesser price in comparison to what they purchased for. Now, the caveat on that is when those people go buy, and if they stay in the market, the property that they're buying is also a lot less as well. So if you're trading in the same market, you're trading dollar for dollar. But if you're going to get out of the market, then that's when it could become a little risky, and that's when you take on the associated loss of that. The other thing is, this doesn't account for the fees associated with real estate, right? As much as it's like, we're talking $45,000 and $56,000 on average. When you add on the land transfer taxes combined with the commissions and just moving costs, those numbers can get significant when it comes to buying, selling, especially for those people that have purchased during that time. But I have this conversation all the time. It's people always ask me and say, hey, I'm a little bit underwater on my property. I bought in 2022 for this amount. Should I hold it or what should I do? And my response is, let's take a step back and let's remove prices from it for a second. What's your family situation right now? What are your needs? What do you want to do? Do you want to move closer to work, or do you need a bigger house? Or you having there's so many different other variables that go into a move other than just price. And oftentimes it's like, well, if you're just going to wait to be into a net positive position on the sale of your property, that could be another 5 years. That could be another 8 years, right? And if you're going to, wait for the markets to bounce back to the point of, our 2021, 2022 market, who knows how long that's going to be. However, but if you're living in a condo and you're having your first child, well, it's not necessarily the best place, in terms of a 1-bedroom condo to have a newborn, and it's pretty difficult. So if you're in that position and you want to move up to a townhouse, well, that makes more sense. And that townhouse that you're going to go buy was also worth, an astronomical value in 2022. And those prices have come down. So I always, like to look at lifestyle and in terms of how you're going to make your next move as a family, or are you trying to be closer to work in comparison to just, strictly looking at the dollar for dollar value.
It really is that individual situation, and you have to, look at it that way. So that is where a real estate professional can really help. We're talking to Phil Golfi today. This is the Golfi Real Estate Show on News Talk 610 CKTV. Stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Are you worried about selling your home on time and for the most money? Hi, I'm Rob Golfi. Every year we invest millions of dollars in our advanced marketing system, ensuring your home is seen by tens of thousands of potential buyers. We don't just hope it sells, we make it sell.
Welcome back to the Golfi Real Estate Show. I'm Stephanie Vivier. Phil Golfi is with us today, covering many topics when it comes to real estate, and there is so much to know. Depending on how the weather goes, I guess we're going to get summer at some point or the other, but it might be the year to buy a cottage. Apparently, the cottage market is open to buyers right now. Phil, let us know what's happening.
The cottage market is open for business. We saw a surge of listings like right after the election. There's a lot of cottage inventory out there right now. And if you're in the market, or you're thinking, or you want to buy a cottage, you have a lot of options. So if get in touch with a realtor, and I would say that there's probably no better time to buy a cottage than right now. But that comes with a lot of looming, unpredictability, uncertainty. And that's probably the reason for what's going on in the cottage market. But REMAX just did a survey, and they're realizing that there's a huge demographic shift in the recreational market. So and we've talked about this before, we're in the largest transfer of generational wealth that's going to happen over the next few years. And we're going to experience over $1 trillion in wealth transfer, and that's currently going on right now. A large portion to move from boomers to younger generations by 2026, and that's according to Chartered Professional Accountants Canada. So what they're saying is, when we see this wealth transfer, or as it continues to happen, a lot of people that are inheriting this money are going to be going to buy, recreational properties, recreational cars, go on lavish vacations and things like that. So we're expecting to see the cottage market to bounce back, which is a really good sign. And then combined with this, the work from home or work remotely still exists. So we still see a large demographic that's going to buy cottages as their primary residence in cottage country, which, would be amazing. I couldn't do that, but kudos to those who can. And so, those buyers are being pushed out of urban areas and going into, the cottage country. So the cottage market took a beating in the last few years in terms of price points, in terms of sale activity, and now if you're in the market or have always dreamt of owning a cottage, it's like there's no better time. And with these recent reports, everything's pointing towards the cottage market to bounce back, including the price points of those cottage homes.
When you talk about that transfer of wealth as well, Phil, it comes to mind, people might be inheriting cottages that they don't want. I know in our family, I've got family that lives in Alberta, and, my brother-in-law's mother passed away, and they have a cottage here in Ontario. Well, the brother already has his own cottage. The other one lives over here. He lives over there, right? They don't want it, right? So there's, that possibility for people too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that all the time where, a family will inherit a cottage and taxes and maintenance have just gotten so expensive that this cottage is costing them thousands of dollars a year, even though it's already paid for just to carry. And so we see that as people find that as a burden as well and not wanting to inherit it, and so they'll just sell it. But it's the cottage market, the cottage country is so interesting right now. We see a ton of people selling, and there's a ton of inventory. But it's like I said, it's a great way for people to pop into the market. There's also a lot of people wondering if in this position, wondering if they should sell their cottage, right? It's there's some people that only use it a few times a year and don't get the value out of it or want to move on from it. And, they're always asking, should I sell now or sell later? And it's always a difficult position, but this is the best time to put your cottage up for sale right now. You can always test the market, see how it does. And if it doesn't work out, you go back to the market next year. But it would be, if you're in a position right now where you absolutely need to sell a cottage and you need to get rid of one, it's a difficult market to sell in, and you're only stuck with, having to reduce the sale price to try and generate a buyer.
Can you give us some high-level things to think about when buying a cottage, Phil? Because it's different from a house, right? You're getting into septic sometime, you're getting into the land being a little bit different rules in terms of there's like an association, the lake, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, what kind of things that people, who've bought houses before maybe wouldn't consider when they're looking for a cottage? Yeah.
So my number one advice is try and use somebody local to that area in terms of an agent. We see often so many times, and it happens to us as well, is when an agent, people have asked me and say, hey, Phil, I want to go buy this cottage. Can you help me out? And I often refer them out to a local realtor in that area. And because those little cottage towns and cottage countries are so unique and have their own way of things and the amount of information that's available, like you want to use somebody local to that specific cottage area every single time. And this person will help you navigate the best way you can. But yeah, like these cottages are super interesting. We've seen off-grid cottages, septic, cistern, well, those things are all common. But it's also important, like I always say, when you're buying a cottage, pay attention to sun exposure. Where's the sun going to be at certain times of day? Obviously, if you're going up north and you want the sun exposure, right? You want to see where the sun's going to be at a certain time of day, and that might help you make your decision in terms of what type of cottage you're going to buy, just based on what side of the lake it's on or where the sun exposure is directly at. So yeah, there's so many different things, so many different rules. Every municipality has their own certain set of rules. When you go up into the Muskokas, it's, boathouses are a big thing. Does the property come with a boathouse? Are you able to build one? Things like that. I always, people love jumping off docks or having a slide off a dock. It's, is the water deep enough? Is it sandy? Is it rocky? Is it weedy? And then also, like, what type of maintenance does a cottage require? Some require, year-round maintenance and things like that, and some require little to no maintenance at all. Is that important to you? So and then wear and tear, right? Like if it's very difficult to find trades and find repair people and find people who are going to maintain properties up in cottage country. Is this a type of property that needs a lot of immediate work or needs to be serviced all the time? So it's just finding something that fits your lifestyle, whether it's both in the summer and winter months. But like I said, going back to what I when I first said is connect with local agents who are specific to that certain area that you're looking. And I always say, you don't know what you don't know. Those people will be able to help you and guide you in the right direction, and find you exactly what you're looking for in comparison to, if I were to go up to, the Kawarthas or the Muskokas and try and help and advise somebody on a cottage or a property. I'm just not familiar with those areas as much as a local representative would be.
Some great advice for sure. You said, Phil, that it would be nice if you could, get that cottage property and work from there, but your job really is an in-person job, right? You have to go and meet with people, and you're sometimes meeting with people you've never, well, I guess often meeting with people you've never even seen before. Is that weird sometimes?
Yeah. So it like when you step back and you think about it, it's, we're walking into people's houses every single day with people who we've never met, who we don't know, and we don't know them more than just by their first and last name and their home address. So it's it could be nerve-wracking sometimes. We have our share of stories in terms of odd occurrences or things that have happened that are just in comparison to other people's professions would just kind of blow your mind and make you shake your head. But yeah, there's every so often there's these news articles that pop up of realtors being assaulted or attacked or put in an uncomfortable position. So yeah, it's we see little stories pop up all the time. And then when you take it a layer, further and go a little deeper, oftentimes, we're put in positions where there's, a dispute between the sellers, and so there's a lot of divorce situations that are happening, and we're kind of the ones in the middle of trying to mediate and sell the house. So yeah, there's unfortunately when you take a step back and you reflect on the job and you just think about what you do every day, it can be, scary at times. But I always say there's so many good people out there that will invite us into their home, and it's you're sharing a coffee and having a laugh and a chat, and they're putting all their trust in you to sell their property. So there's the good, and then there's the bad, and the bad is what you see in the news, and it's unfortunate, but we try to protect ourselves the best we can, and we are put in some vulnerable positions. I had this one recently, and how much time do we have? Do we have some time?
Oh, we got time. Yeah.
So I'll finish.
You're about to spill some tea, Phil. We'll make time for this.
So I had this one recently. It was a divorce situation in West Lincoln, and I'll go super quick on this, but I pull up to the property and I can feel there was like this tension already, right? And it's not too often when you pull up to the property and everyone's outside waiting for you to arrive. Ooh, it was just so I sat in my car, and it was kind of a rural property, and I have these like two big German shepherds that are just like circling my car, okay? And I'm like, oh boy. And then you can kind of, like I said, you can feel, there's some tension between the ex-partners. And so one of the partners walks over and says, thanks for coming. Like, I really appreciate it. But my daughter is up over there on the balcony, and I look over and she's there and she has her phone out. And she says the one partner says, she's just filming just in case something happens. And I said, okay, well, I'm a real estate agent. I'm coming to evaluate the house. What's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then she goes, well, my ex-partner over there says he's going to hit you. And I'm like, oh boy. Like, it's a Saturday morning. It's like 9:30 a.m. I got two, German shepherds right now circling my car. She's at my window talking to me, and I'm looking over to a big burly man kind of standing by his truck saying he's going to hit me. And I'm just like, when you think about that and you take a step back, you're like, what is going on? Like, what did I just walk into? And right. that was one of my recent experiences. It's just like, it some of it just does not make sense. And, like here I am, I'm dressed up wearing a suit and in dress shoes, and this guy's about to, take my head off because his ex-wife called me to come evaluate the property. So that's just, you know what I mean? It's just,
there.
It's just crazy sometimes. And, there's so many of those types of stories, unfortunately, but like I said, there's way more good ones, and I've met amazing people in this industry, and I'm so lucky, Some of my best friends have been my past clients who I've met through buying and selling homes. And my dad always says it. He says this is the best industry in the world. It's a great opportunity to meet, so many interesting people, so many good people. And it gives you a great life. So we're super lucky.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And, through meeting all those people, I'm sure you're the person who do you know a guy who, and I bet you know somebody.
Oh, all the time. It's always that. That's how it always starts, right? Do you know a guy who? So I have a Rolodex of people and past clients and it's fun. Like, when like I said before, I've been in this industry for almost 10 years now. And it's like everywhere you go, you meet someone or you see someone who you've had a really cool, good past experience with in terms of buying or selling their home. It's a very personal experience. And then, you're in touch every single day working together. And then once you've accomplished kind of the task, you're not in, it's like you're speed dating almost, and then you're only in touch once or twice a year after that, but you always run into them in the community. So it's super interesting that way.
That's fun. That's good stuff. Well, Phil, we always appreciate it when you stop by here and fill in for Rob. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it was awesome. Another great show. Thank you so much.
Phil Golfi from the #1 REMAX team in Canada, the Golfi team. Make sure you give them a call. You can have a friendly conversation just like Phil and I just had. Thanks for listening to the Golfi Real Estate Show here on News Talk 610 CKTV.